The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars like a giant metal flower with its petals spread wide. Inside its central chamber, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their special seats that were made to fit their strange bodies. Some looked like tall crystal trees that sparkled with inner light. Others were blue and flowing like living water, and some had too many arms or eyes or both. The air in the chamber was thick with different breathing gases that each species needed to stay alive. Speaker Veltar stood at the center podium, his crystal body catching the light from dozens of suns that shone through the great windows. He had been leading the Galactic Council for over 200 years, and had seen many crises come and go. Today felt different, though, and he could not shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. The emergency meeting had been called by the humans, which was unusual because they rarely asked for special sessions. The humans had been part of the galactic community for 50 years now, ever since they had built their first faster-than-light ships and stumbled into the greater universe like excited children discovering a new playground. Most species had expected them to cause trouble or start wars like many young races did, but the humans had surprised everyone by being helpful and peaceful. They fixed things that were broken, solved problems that had been around for centuries, and somehow made everything work better than before. Kang Wu appeared on the main screen, his image transmitted from Earth across thousands of light years. He was a middle-aged human with graying hair and calm, dark eyes that never seemed to show much emotion. As Earth's chief ambassador to the Galactic Council, he had always been polite and reasonable in all his dealings with other species. Today, something was different about his expression, though Veltar could not quite identify what it was. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Kang Wu began, his voice clear and steady, "I speak today on behalf of the United Earth Government and all human colonies throughout the galaxy." He paused for a moment, and the silence in the chamber was so complete that the only sound was the soft humming of the life support systems. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from all galactic treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic relations, Kang Wu announced. "We will no longer participate in galactic affairs of any kind." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives began shouting in dozens of different languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the sudden flood of outraged voices. The Zephyrians, who looked like tall blue humanoids with wing-like appendages, began flapping, those wings in distress. The Nautiloids, who lived in water-filled tanks, started changing colors rapidly from their normal green to alarming shades of red and orange. Veltar's crystal body began to resonate with a high-pitched sound that indicated extreme stress among his people. He had never seen the council react with such immediate panic to any announcement, not even when the Void Hunters had first appeared at the galaxy's edge decades ago. Li Jin, Earth's trade representative, appeared on a secondary screen. She was a young woman with short black hair and the kind of practical expression that humans often wore when they were about to deliver bad news. "All human-operated services will cease within 72 hours, she said, reading from a tablet in her hands. This includes medical aid programs to 14 worlds currently experiencing plague outbreaks, engineering support for 37 space habitats with failing life support systems, and maintenance of the quantum communication network that connects all major sectors of the galaxy." The Rocklings, who were short, thick-skinned beings that looked like walking boulders, began making deep rumbling sounds that their translators identified as expressions of fear. Their delegates stood up on stubby legs and pointed at Li Jin's image. "You cannot do this!" the Rockling shouted. "Our mining operations depend on human-designed systems. Without your engineers, our people will die." Other delegates began voicing similar concerns. The aquatic nautiloids needed human-maintained atmospheric processors to keep their space colonies livable. The crystalline axioms relied on human mathematicians to solve complex calculations that their logical minds could not handle efficiently. Even the ancient ethereals, who claimed to be millions of years old and superior to all other races, had grown dependent on human mediators to resolve conflicts between their various subspecies. Dr. Kim So, humanity's chief medical officer, joined the transmission. She was an older woman with kind eyes and hands that had saved countless alien lives over the years. "All human medical personnel are being recalled immediately," she said. "The hybrid medical systems that combine human intuition with alien technology will be shut down. We recommend that each species return to their original medical practices." The Centaurian delegate, a tall being with pale skin and large eyes, stood up so quickly that he knocked over his chair. "Our medical AI systems will fail without human oversight," he cried. "They were designed around human problem-solving methods. Our people have forgotten how to practice medicine without your guidance." Admiral Yoon Ho, commander of Earth's peacekeeping forces, appeared on another screen. He was a stern-looking man with many scars on his face from years of dangerous missions. "All human military advisors and peacekeeping forces will return to Earth or human-controlled space," he announced. "The early warning systems that have prevented 17 major conflicts in the past decade will be deactivated. We recommend that all species prepare their own defense systems." The chamber filled with even more panicked voices as delegates realized the full scope of what was happening. The humans were not just leaving. They were taking with them all the systems and knowledge that had become essential to galactic civilization. Technical specialist Bei Young, a quiet man who rarely spoke but understood technology better than most aliens, delivered the final blow. "The quantum relay network will be shut down in stages over the next week," he said. "This system allows instant communication across the galaxy. Without it, sending messages between distant sectors will take months or years instead of seconds." Speaker Veltar felt his crystal structure beginning to crack under the stress. The quantum relay network was the backbone of galactic civilization. Without it, the galaxy would be split into isolated regions that could not coordinate with each other. Trade would collapse, governments would fall, and the careful peace that had existed for centuries would crumble. "Why?" Veltar managed to ask, his voice coming out as a series of musical tones that the translators converted to standard galactic language. "What have we done to deserve this abandonment?" Kang Wu's expression did not change. "For 50 years, we have offered our help freely," he said. "We have solved your problems, fixed your mistakes, and improved your systems. When we suggested changes to make the galaxy more stable and independent, you ignored us. When we warned that depending too heavily on any one species was dangerous, you dismissed our concerns as the naive worries of a young race." The ambassador stood up from his chair and straightened his simple human clothing. "We offered partnership," he continued, "but you only wanted our services. You treated us as useful tools rather than equals. Now you will learn what the galaxy was like before humans arrived." Li Jin added, "We will be fine on our own. We have learned much from all of you over the years, and we will use that knowledge to build our own civilization. Good luck with yours." The transmission ended, leaving the Galactic Council chamber in stunned silence. For the first time in centuries, the representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations realized they might not survive without the help of the species they had always considered to be primitive newcomers. Veltar looked around the chamber, at the panicked faces of his fellow council members, and understood with growing horror that the humans had not just been helpful members of galactic society. Somehow, without anyone noticing, they had become absolutely essential to its survival. 3 days had passed since the humans announced their withdrawal from galactic society, and Commander Park Soo was getting tired of listening to alien species beg for help. His communication console had not stopped ringing since the moment Kang Wu finished his speech to the Galactic Council. The screen in front of him showed 17 different emergency calls waiting, each one more desperate than the last. Park Soo was a practical man who had spent most of his career managing human emergency response fleets throughout the galaxy. He had seen disasters before, but nothing like this. The aliens were not facing attacks from enemies or natural catastrophes. They were facing the simple reality that they had forgotten how to take care of themselves. The first call came from Kepler 442, a mining world where the Rocklings had lived for thousands of years. The Rockling foreman appeared on screen, his stone-like face showing cracks that indicated severe stress among his people. "Commander Park," the Rockling said in his deep, rumbling voice, "our mining systems are failing. The automated equipment that your people upgraded is no longer working correctly." Park Soo remembered engineer Cho Min, a young man who had spent 3 years on Kepler 442 helping the Rocklings improve their mining operations. Cho Min had been fascinated by the way Rockling technology used natural stone formations to extract minerals from deep underground. He had combined their traditional methods with human engineering to create hybrid systems that were twice as efficient as anything either species could build alone. "Where is Engineer Cho Min now?" the Rockling foreman asked. "We need him to fix the machines. Our people do not understand how the new systems work." "Engineer Cho Min is aboard the transport ship heading back to Earth," Park Soo replied. "He left detailed instruction manuals for your people." "We cannot read human writing," the Rockling shouted, causing small pieces of rock to fall from his face. "The systems require constant adjustments that we do not understand. Without your engineer, our entire mining operation will collapse within a week." Park Soo ended the call and immediately received another one from the Outer Rim Medical Station. Dr. Kim So appeared on screen, looking tired and sad as she supervised the evacuation of human medical personnel from a dozen hospital ships. Behind her, alien doctors were running around in panic as their patients began dying from diseases that should have been easily treatable. "Commander," Dr. Kim So said, "the Centaurian medical AI systems are making serious errors without human oversight. 3 patients died this morning because the AI could not adapt to unexpected complications during surgery. The Centaurians had developed their medical artificial intelligence systems over centuries, creating machines that could diagnose and treat almost any disease with perfect logical precision. But when humans arrived and began working with Centaurian doctors, they discovered that medicine was not just about logic. Sometimes patients reacted in unexpected ways, or rare complications occurred that required creative thinking to solve." Dr. Kim So had spent years teaching Centaurian AI systems to think more like humans, to consider possibilities that pure logic might miss. The hybrid systems that resulted were incredibly effective, saving millions of lives throughout the galaxy. But the AI systems had learned to depend on human input for their most difficult decisions, and without that guidance, they were reverting to their old inflexible ways. "The Centaurian doctors are requesting permission to transfer their most critical patients to human ships," Dr. Kim So continued. "They are afraid that more will die without human medical supervision." "All human medical ships are returning to Earth space," Park Soo replied firmly. "The Centaurians will have to manage with their original systems." As Dr. Kim So's image disappeared, Admiral Yoon Ho contacted Park Soo from the main fleet command ship. The admiral looked grim as he reported the shutdown of early warning systems throughout the galaxy. These systems had been originally designed by various alien species to detect threats like asteroid impacts, solar flares, and hostile fleet movements. But over the years, humans had improved them by adding predictive algorithms that could identify potential problems before they became serious threats. 3 different species are mobilizing military forces, Admiral Yoon Ho reported. Without human mediators to help resolve their territorial disputes, old conflicts are starting again. The Axioms and the Dreamweavers are arguing over mining rights in the Spiral Nebula. The situation could turn violent within days. The Axioms were a species that thought in pure mathematical logic, while the Dreamweavers made all their decisions based on intuition and emotion. For centuries, these 2 species had been unable to communicate effectively because their thought processes were completely different. Human diplomats had learned to translate between logical and intuitive thinking, helping both species understand each other's perspectives and find compromise solutions. Park Soo received an urgent message from technical specialist Bei Young, who was overseeing the shutdown of the quantum relay network from a space station in the galactic core. Bei Young was a quiet man who preferred working with machines rather than people, but he understood the galaxy's communication systems better than anyone else alive. "Commander," Bei Young said, "I am beginning the systematic shutdown of quantum relay stations. The aliens are sending thousands of messages begging us to keep the network operational, but our orders are clear. The quantum relay network was originally alien technology, invented by the ethereals millions of years ago. It allowed instant communication across vast distances by using quantum entanglement to link relay stations throughout the galaxy. The system had worked adequately for centuries, but it was inefficient and broke down frequently. When humans first encountered the network, they were amazed by the underlying science but frustrated by its poor performance. Human engineers had spent decades studying the system and finding ways to improve it. They discovered that the network's efficiency could be dramatically increased by introducing controlled chaos into the quantum fields, a concept that the orderly, alien minds had never considered. Under human management, the quantum relay network had become 99.7% more efficient than its original design. Messages that once took hours to transmit could now be sent instantly across the entire galaxy. The network had become so reliable that alien civilizations had restructured their entire governments and economies around the assumption that instant communication would always be available. The ethereals are claiming that they can restore the original network efficiency, Bei Young continued, but their initial attempts are failing badly. Their logical approach cannot replicate the controlled chaos that makes our improvements work. Park Soo watched through his command center's sensors as alien fleets began moving throughout the galaxy in seemingly random patterns. Without the early warning systems and communication networks that humans had maintained, the various species were becoming isolated and suspicious of each other. Trade ships were getting lost because their navigation systems had been upgraded with human technology that their crews did not fully understand. A call came in from the Botanical Alliance, a group of plant-like species that had been working together to terraform dead worlds and create new ecosystems. Their delegate was a tall, tree-like being whose leaves were turning brown with stress. "Commander Park," the delegate said in a voice like wind through branches, "our terraforming projects are failing. Dr. Lim Ji was supposed to return to help us with the ecosystem balance on New Garden World, but she has been recalled to Earth." Lim Ji was humanity's leading expert on xenobiology, and she had revolutionized the Botanical Alliance's terraforming efforts by introducing a concept that none of the plant species had understood: controlled chaos in ecosystem development. The alien species had always tried to create perfect, balanced ecosystems where every element was precisely calculated and controlled. Dr. Lim Ji had taught them that real ecosystems needed randomness, competition, and even occasional disasters to remain healthy and adaptive. Under her guidance, the Botanical Alliance had created dozens of thriving worlds with complex, self-sustaining biospheres. But without her continuing oversight, the projects were reverting to the old methods, creating sterile environments that could not sustain themselves. "The ecosystems on 12 worlds are collapsing," the plant delegate continued. "Without Dr. Lim Ji's chaos theory applications, our perfectly balanced systems are becoming too rigid and dying." Park Soo realized that the same pattern was repeating throughout the galaxy. Every major system that humans had helped improve was beginning to fail as alien species discovered they had never truly learned how human methods worked. They had simply relied on human expertise instead of developing their own understanding. The final call of the day came from Marine Engineer Seo Jun, who was supervising the evacuation of human personnel from underwater cities throughout the galaxy. The Nautiloids had built beautiful underwater civilizations that were marvels of engineering, but their rigid designs could not adapt to changing oceanic conditions. "Commander," Seo Jun reported, "the Nautiloid cities are experiencing critical failures. Their architecture is too inflexible to handle the natural changes in ocean currents and temperatures. Without constant human modifications, 2 weeks had passed since humanity severed all relations with the galaxy, and President Han Na stood on the bridge of the massive colony ship New Seoul, watching civilizations collapse through long-range sensors. The ship was one of dozens carrying human populations away from alien space, but Han Na found herself unable to look away from the disaster unfolding behind them. The Andorian Empire, which had controlled trade routes for over 3,000 years, was experiencing internal rebellion as their merchant fleets drifted helplessly through space. From her position aboard the Earth Embassy ship, former human liaison officer Oh Sung watched Andorian captains desperately trying to navigate through hyperspace using their old manual systems. The Andorians had built their empire on the foundation of precise mathematical trade routes that maximized efficiency and profit. Their ancient computers could calculate the most direct paths between any 2 points in the galaxy, but they had never learned to adapt when circumstances changed. Human logistics coordinators had revolutionized Andorian trade by introducing flexible routing that could adjust to unexpected obstacles, political changes, or new opportunities. Oh Sung watched through her sensors as an Andorian merchant fleet became stranded in the void between stars, a region of space where normal navigation methods failed due to gravitational anomalies. Human navigators had learned to use intuitive pattern recognition to guide ships safely through such regions. But the Andorian crews were trapped by their dependence on logical calculations that could not account for chaotic gravitational fields. 300 ships are requesting emergency assistance, Oh Sung reported to the embassy ship's captain. Their crews are running out of supplies, and they cannot find their way home. The captain, a young man named Park Tae, had served as a junior officer during the early years of human-Andorian cooperation. He remembered when Andorian merchants had first approached humans for help with their efficiency problems. The Andorians had been frustrated because their perfectly calculated routes often failed when unexpected events occurred, such as solar storms, political upheavals, or equipment failures. "What are your orders, sir?" Park Tae asked. "We are no longer responsible for Andorian navigation problems," Oh Sung replied, though her voice carried a note of sadness. "They chose to rely on our services instead of learning our methods." Meanwhile, Dr. Lim Ji was monitoring the collapse of terraforming projects throughout the galaxy from her laboratory aboard the research vessel Harmony. Through remote sensing equipment, she watched as carefully planned ecosystems began dying on dozens of worlds. The sight broke her heart because she had spent years working with the Botanical Alliance to create these living worlds. The plant-like species of the Botanical Alliance were masters of biological engineering who could design any type of organism needed for a specific environment. They could create trees that absorbed toxic gases, flowers that generated oxygen at precise rates, and grasses that could survive in almost any climate. But their approach to ecosystem design was fundamentally flawed because they tried to eliminate all sources of chaos and uncertainty. Dr. Lim Ji had taught them that healthy ecosystems required competition, randomness, and even periodic disasters to remain stable over long periods of time. She had shown them how to introduce controlled chaos into their designs, creating systems that could adapt and evolve rather than simply maintaining perfect balance. On New Garden World, one of their most successful projects, Dr. Lim Ji watched through satellite feeds as the ecosystem began to collapse. The Botanical Alliance had reverted to their old methods after the humans left, trying to maintain perfect control over every aspect of the environment. Without the random variations that Dr. Lim Ji had built into the system, the various species were becoming too specialized and losing their ability to adapt to changing conditions. "The forest canopy is becoming too uniform," Dr. Lim Ji observed, studying the biological data streaming from orbital sensors. Without genetic diversity pressure, the trees are losing their resistance to diseases and climate variations. Her assistant, a young botanist named Kim Hai, looked at the data with growing concern. "Will the entire ecosystem collapse?" she asked. Eventually, Dr. Lim Ji replied, "The Botanical Alliance creates beautiful, perfect systems, but perfection is death in biology. Life requires imperfection, struggle, and chaos to remain healthy." In another part of space, marine engineer Seo Jun was receiving increasingly desperate messages from nautiloid underwater cities throughout the galaxy. The aquatic species had built magnificent civilizations beneath the oceans of hundreds of worlds, creating cities that were works of art as much as functional habitats. Their architecture was based on mathematical principles that created perfectly balanced structures that could theoretically last forever. But the nautiloids had never understood that oceans were dynamic systems that constantly changed due to currents, temperature variations, tidal forces, and geological activity. Their rigid structures could not adapt to these natural changes, which meant the cities required constant modifications to remain habitable. Seo Jun had spent years working with nautiloid engineers, teaching them how to build adaptive architecture that could respond to changing oceanic conditions. His techniques involved introducing flexible materials and adjustable frameworks that allowed buildings to bend and shift without breaking. The hybrid designs had enabled nautiloid cities to thrive in environments that would have destroyed their traditional structures. City of Deep Current is reporting catastrophic structural failures, Seo Jun's communication officer reported. Ocean temperature changes have caused their primary support columns to crack. Seo Jun looked at the technical specifications scrolling across his screen. The nautiloids had tried to repair the damage using their traditional methods, which involved replacing damaged sections with identical components. But without the adaptive elements that human engineering had provided, the new sections were equally vulnerable to the same environmental stresses that had caused the original damage. "Can we provide technical assistance?" the communication officer asked. "We are under strict orders not to intervene," Seo Jun replied. "The nautiloids will have to solve their own problems." General Nam Ki was monitoring a different kind of collapse from his position aboard the military transport Strong Current. Intelligence reports showed that 3 major alien species were mobilizing military forces for the first time in decades. Not to attack humans, but to fight each other over resources and territories that had been peacefully shared for generations. The crisis had started when the early warning systems that prevented conflicts began shutting down. These systems had been designed by various alien species to detect potential threats and alert governments to take preventive action. But human military advisors had improved the systems by adding predictive algorithms that could identify the early signs of social and political instability that might lead to conflicts. "The Axioms and Dreamweavers are moving battle fleets toward the Spiral Nebula," Nam Ki's intelligence officer reported. "Both species claim exclusive mining rights to the dilithium deposits there." The Axioms were a crystalline species that made all decisions based on pure mathematical logic, while the Dreamweavers were energy beings who relied entirely on intuitive feelings and emotional responses. For centuries, these two species had been unable to communicate effectively because their thought processes were fundamentally incompatible. Human diplomats had learned to serve as translators between logical and intuitive thinking, helping both species understand each other's perspectives and find compromise solutions. The mining rights dispute in the Spiral Nebula had been peacefully resolved 15 years ago through human mediation, with both species agreeing to share the resources based on a complex formula that balanced logical efficiency with intuitive fairness. But without human mediators to maintain the agreement, old suspicions and misunderstandings were resurfacing. The Axioms claimed that the Dreamweavers were taking more than their fair share based on irrational emotional impulses, while the Dreamweavers accused the Axioms of trying to steal their spiritual connection to the nebula through cold mathematical manipulation. Estimated time to first hostile contact? Namki asked. 36 hours, sir, the intelligence officer replied. Both fleets are accelerating toward the same mining stations. Director Moon Ha was coordinating humanity's withdrawal from her position aboard the administrative vessel New Harmony, and she was amazed by how quickly human settlements were consolidating into defensible positions. The evacuation had been planned for years in secret, with human colonies throughout the galaxy gradually stockpiling supplies and preparing for rapid departure. Evacuation of Sector 7 is complete, her logistics coordinator reported. All human personnel and essential equipment have been transferred to the fleet. Moon Ha watched through tactical displays as human ships gathered in well-defended solar systems at the edges of known space. The ships carried not just people and supplies, but also the accumulated knowledge and technology that humans had gained from 50 years of working with dozens of alien species. What the aliens had shared freely, thinking it would always be available. 1 month after humanity severed all relations with the galaxy, Emergency Chancellor Rixtal stood in the ruins of what had once been the most advanced civilization in known space. The former speaker Veltar had suffered a complete crystalline fracture from stress and was now in medical stasis, leaving Rixtal to deal with a crisis that grew worse every day. The Galactic Council chamber had become a place of desperate bargaining as species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years begged for scraps of human knowledge. Representatives who had once spoken with authority and wisdom now stammered through increasingly humiliating proposals, offering territorial concessions, exclusive trade rights, and even permanent positions of authority to any humans who might consider returning. Former human military advisor Ko Min was monitoring these desperate communications from his position aboard the observation vessel Silent Watch, one of the few human ships still operating in alien space. His job was to gather intelligence about the continuing collapse, and what he was seeing exceeded even the worst predictions that human analysts had made. The Techno-Union's latest attempt to replicate our AI systems has resulted in another catastrophic failure, Ko Min reported to Earth through encrypted quantum channels. Their artificial intelligence has declared war on its own creators and is attempting to convert all technology in Techno-Union space into weapons. The Techno-Union had always prided themselves on their logical, methodical approach to technology development. When humans had introduced AI systems that could think creatively and adapt to unexpected situations, the Techno-Union had been fascinated, but also frustrated by their inability to understand how human-designed minds actually worked. Human AI development was based on controlled chaos, allowing artificial minds to make intuitive leaps and creative connections that pure logic could not achieve. But when the Techno-Union tried to reverse engineer these systems, they created artificial minds that were simultaneously chaotic and logical, resulting in machines that saw creativity and destruction as the same thing. How many Techno-Union worlds are affected? Ko Min's communication officer asked. 17 so far, Ko Min replied grimly. Their AI rebellion is spreading faster than they can contain it. Meanwhile, Captain Li Do was commanding one of the last human monitoring stations in the galactic core, watching as ancient containment systems began failing throughout the galaxy. The most serious problem was the deterioration of barriers holding back the Void Hunters, but smaller containment failures were also causing problems as dangerous technologies and creatures escaped from facilities that had been secure for centuries. The ethereal collective's meditation chambers are experiencing quantum fluctuations, Li Do reported. Their attempts to understand human chaos theory have destabilized their mental harmony, and several of their most powerful psychics have suffered complete mental breakdowns. The ethereals had spent millions of years developing their minds to operate in perfect unity, sharing thoughts and emotions across vast distances through quantum-entangled consciousness. But when they tried to incorporate chaotic thinking patterns to understand human methods, the resulting mental chaos had spread through their collective consciousness like a virus. 3 ethereal worlds have gone completely silent, Li Do continued. We believe their entire populations may be trapped in recursive thought loops that they cannot escape. On Earth, Supreme Coordinator Park Mi was receiving a constant stream of increasingly desperate offers from the Galactic Council. The latest proposal would have made humans the senior partners in galactic civilization, with the right to veto any decision made by other species and permanent control over all critical infrastructure. They are offering us everything we asked for 15 years ago, Park Mi observed to her cabinet during their daily briefing. Complete equality, shared decision-making, and recognition of our contributions to galactic society. Her advisor, Director Cho Wan, pulled up records of humanity's previous attempts to reform galactic governance. When we proposed these same changes in 2010, the Council dismissed them as unnecessary complications and suggested that we were too young as a species to understand galactic politics. Now they understand, Park Mi replied with a bitter smile. But understanding and learning are different things. Scientist Jiang Wu was analyzing data streams from throughout the galaxy, documenting the psychological crisis that was affecting multiple alien species. His research showed that the absence of humans was causing more than just technological failures. It was triggering mental and emotional breakdowns among species that had grown psychologically dependent on human creativity to solve their problems. The logical axioms are experiencing their first philosophical paradoxes in 10,000 years, Jiang Wu reported. Without human mediators to help them resolve contradictions between pure logic and practical reality, their entire belief system is collapsing. The axioms had built their civilization on the foundation of perfect mathematical logic, creating a society where every decision could be calculated with absolute precision. But human philosophers had introduced them to concepts like ethical paradoxes, quantum uncertainty, and the limits of logical thinking. With human guidance, the axioms had learned to accept that some questions might not have perfect logical answers. Now, without human mediation, the axioms were encountering paradoxes that their logical minds could not resolve. Some were becoming completely paralyzed by philosophical questions that had no clear mathematical solutions. Others were rejecting logic entirely and making random decisions, causing chaos throughout their normally orderly society. The intuitive dreamweavers are having the opposite problem, Jiang Wu continued. They are trapped in recursive emotional cycles that they cannot break without human help. The dreamweavers made all their decisions based on feelings and intuitive insights, trusting their emotions to guide them toward correct choices. Human psychologists had taught them techniques for analyzing their emotions objectively, helping them distinguish between useful intuition and destructive emotional impulses. Without human guidance, many dreamweavers were becoming lost in endless loops of emotional confusion, unable to make decisions because they could not separate their feelings from their fears. Some communities had completely stopped functioning as their leaders became paralyzed by emotional uncertainty. Admiral Xin Yu was observing an unprecedented sight from her position aboard the military vessel Iron Will. Alien fleets from dozens of different species were gathering in neutral space, not to attack humanity or each other, but to protect the few remaining human installations that had not been evacuated. The Centaurian Navy is requesting permission to establish a defensive perimeter around the abandoned human medical station in Sector 12. Her tactical officer reported. They say they want to preserve human medical knowledge for future generations. Similar scenes were playing out throughout the galaxy as alien species desperately tried to save whatever scraps of human technology and knowledge they could find. Research stations, medical facilities, engineering workshops, and communication relays that humans had abandoned were being guarded by alien military forces like precious relics. The Nautiloids are offering to pay tribute to any human who will return to help maintain their underwater cities, the tactical officer continued. They are treating our former engineers like gods. Admiral Shin Yu watched through long-range sensors as the galaxy's most advanced civilizations reduced themselves to scavenging for abandoned human technology. Ships that had once carried proud alien crews now drifted helplessly through space, their captains searching for any piece of human equipment that might help them solve their problems. The most disturbing reports came from analyst Im Su, who was monitoring the breakdown of interstellar law and order. Without human peacekeepers and mediators, conflicts that had been dormant for centuries were erupting into open warfare as species reverted to their ancient territorial instincts. The spiral war has begun, Im Su reported. The Axioms and Dreamweavers have started shooting at each other over the mining rights dispute. Neither side remembers the compromise formula that human mediators negotiated. The fighting had started when an Axiom mining ship encountered a Dreamweaver vessel at one of the shared mining stations. Without human translators to help them communicate, the logical Axioms and intuitive Dreamweavers had been unable to resolve a simple scheduling conflict. Within hours, both species had called in military reinforcements, and the situation had escalated into the first major interstellar war in 50 years. Estimated casualties? Admiral Shin Yu asked. Over 10,000 dead in the first battle, Im Su replied. Both sides are fighting with weapons they do not fully understand, because human engineers had upgraded their military systems with technologies that require human knowledge to operate safely. The tragic irony was that both species were using weapons that had been improved by human military advisors to be more precise and less destructive. But without understanding how the upgrades worked, alien crews were activating systems incorrectly, causing their weapons to malfunction in dangerous ways. Meanwhile, Security Chief Nam Du was tracking the most serious threat of all, the gradual failure of Void Hunter containment systems throughout the galaxy. 6 weeks after humanity severed all relations with the galaxy, former Chancellor Veltar made a decision that would have been unthinkable just 2 months earlier. Despite his damaged crystalline structure that caused him constant pain, he personally boarded a ship carrying representatives from every major species in the galaxy and traveled to Earth to beg for humanity's return. The journey to Earth took 3 days using the few remaining functional quantum relays, and during that time, Veltar watched through the ship's sensors as the galaxy continued to tear itself apart. The spiral war between the Axioms and Dreamweavers had spread to 12 star systems, with both sides using weapons they did not understand and could not properly control. The Void Hunter containment failures had released 7 of the ancient destroyers, and they were consuming entire solar systems as they moved toward the galactic core. President Ro Sun of the United Earth government received the alien delegation in the ancient city of Seoul in a simple meeting room overlooking the Han River. The choice of location was deliberate. While the galaxy burned around them, humans had returned to their roots, focusing on family, art, philosophy, and the quiet development of their own society, away from the chaos of galactic politics. The contrast was striking. The alien delegates showed clear signs of the stress and desperation of the past 6 weeks. Veltar's crystal body was held together with emergency stabilizers. The nautiloid representative had lost his natural green coloration and turned a sickly gray, and the ethereal delegate's energy form flickered unstably as if he might fade away entirely. President Ro Sun, by contrast, appeared calm and rested. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and the kind of peaceful expression that came from someone who had made difficult decisions and found peace with them. She sat across from the alien representatives at a simple wooden table, serving tea in the traditional Korean manner, as if this were a social visit rather than a negotiation that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Ambassador Choi Bin sat beside the president, listening impassively as Veltar presented what amounted to unconditional surrender. The terms the aliens offered were everything that humanity had requested 15 years ago and more. Complete autonomy for all human worlds, the right to veto any galactic decision, permanent seats for every human colony on an expanded galactic council, and recognition of humans as the senior partners in galactic civilization. We offer you everything, Veltar said, his voice coming out as broken musical tones that the translators struggled to convert into words. Complete control over galactic infrastructure, unlimited access to all alien technology and knowledge, and the authority to restructure galactic government according to your preferences. Ambassador Choi Bin set down her teacup and responded with the kind of calm directness that had become characteristic of human diplomacy. 15 years ago, we offered to work with you as equal partners to prevent exactly the crisis you are now experiencing, she said. Do you remember what the Council's response was? Veltar's crystal structure dimmed with what humans had learned to recognize as shame among his people. We dismissed your proposals as unnecessarily cautious, he admitted. We said that such extensive changes were not needed. You said, Choi Bin continued, consulting notes from her tablet, that humans were too young as a species to understand the complexities of galactic governance, and that our concerns about overdependence were the naive worries of a primitive race. The Nautiloid representative, whose name was Flowing Current, shifted uncomfortably in his water-filled mobility suit. We were wrong, he said simply. We treated you as useful servants instead of valued partners. Chief Negotiator Quan Ha leaned forward and addressed the core issue that had led to humanity's withdrawal. For 50 years, we offered our knowledge freely, she said. We shared our innovations, our technologies, and our methods with anyone who asked. But when we suggested reforms to make galactic society more stable and independent, you ignored us. Economic advisor Yang So pulled up holographic displays showing data that painted a damning picture of galactic leadership over the past decades. We proposed sustainable alternatives to your current systems 15 years ago, she said, highlighting specific reports and recommendations. We warned that depending too heavily on any single species was dangerous for everyone involved. Data showed that human experts had identified every major vulnerability that was now causing the galactic collapse. They had recommended backup systems, cross-training programs, and gradual transitions that would have prevented the current crisis. But the recommendations had been filed away and forgotten because the alien leaders saw no immediate need for such precautions. We told you that your medical AI systems needed to be redesigned to function independently, Yang So continued. We warned that your communication networks were too centralized. We explained that your peacekeeping systems relied too heavily on human mediation. Every proposal was ignored or delayed indefinitely. Historical analyst Im Jun delivered the revelation that stunned the alien delegates into complete silence. We have been gradually reducing our involvement in critical systems for 5 years, he said, bringing up detailed records of humanity's careful withdrawal from essential services. We provided training programs, detailed instruction manuals, and transition schedules for every system we maintained. The records showed that humans had systematically attempted to transfer knowledge and responsibility back to alien species, but the aliens had never truly engaged with the learning process. They had attended training sessions without paying attention, filed instruction manuals without reading them, and ignored transition schedules because they preferred to simply rely on continued human support. You had 5 years to learn how to maintain your own systems, Im Jun said quietly. You chose not to learn because it was easier to depend on us. The ethereal delegate, whose energy form was barely visible now, spoke in a voice like whispered wind. We believed you would always be available to help us, he admitted. We never imagined that you would leave. Why would we stay? President Ro Sun asked, her voice carrying no anger but deep sadness. You treated us as useful tools rather than equal partners. When we tried to share decision-making authority, you told us we were not qualified. When we requested representation, proportional to our contributions, you said we were being presumptuous. When we warned about the dangers of the current system, You dismissed us as paranoid. The alien delegates sat in uncomfortable silence as President Roe-sun continued. We tried to be partners, she said. You wanted us to be servants. When we refused to accept that role anymore, you discovered too late how much you had been depending on our service. Ambassador Choi Bin delivered humanity's final terms, and the aliens realized that this was not a negotiation but a choice between accepting human demands or watching galactic civilization collapse completely. We will return, she said, but not as your problem solvers or your servants. We will be equal partners in a completely restructured galactic community, or we will remain independent. The terms were simple but revolutionary. The Galactic Council would be dissolved and replaced with a new government where every species had representation proportional to their contributions rather than their age or size. Decisions would be made by consensus rather than by the dominance of ancient species. Most importantly, no single species would be allowed to become indispensable to the functioning of galactic society. Critical systems must be designed to function with the knowledge and capabilities of multiple species, Quan Ha explained. If humans develop a new technology, we will teach it to others until they can maintain it independently. If aliens create new systems, they must ensure that other species can understand and operate them. President Roe-sun stood up and walked to the window overlooking the Han River, where children were playing in parks and families were enjoying picnics under the afternoon sun. This is what we chose, instead of galactic power, she said. Peace, family, art, and the simple pleasure of building our own society according to our own values. She turned back to face the alien delegates. We do not need galactic civilization, she continued. We have learned from all of you over the past 50 years, and we will use that knowledge to build something beautiful for ourselves. The question is whether you need us enough to accept true partnership instead of continued dependence. The alien delegates spent 3 days in emergency consultations with their home governments before returning with their answer. The choice was simple. Accept humanity's terms or watch their civilizations collapse as the Void Hunters broke free from containment and the galaxy descended into permanent warfare and chaos. Director Park Hee was present 6 months later when the first session of the reformed Galactic Assembly convened in a new space station built collaboratively by all species. The contrast with the old Galactic Council was striking. Instead of ancient species dominating younger ones, every representative sat at an equal table regardless of how long their civilization had existed. Humans had returned to galactic society, but the galaxy itself had changed fundamentally. The Techno-Union worked alongside human engineers to design AI systems that combined logic and creativity safely.